Well, I know a lot about your life from all our other talks. Walter, your first instrument was a trumpet, you told me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for those people who don't know, Walter is part of the famous Trouts from New Jersey.
Yeah, that's right.
So Walter grew up in Jersey, probably a few years after me. I think we're close in age.
Yeah.
We saw that we went to the same places. Did you tell me, was it the Beatles that made you go out and get a guitar after the trumpet?
Kind of.
Yeah.
The first time I got a guitar, my older brother brought one home, and it was during the era in the United States, the folk music boom.
Sure.
And there was a TV show called Hootenanny.
Yep.
And there was the New Christie Minstrels, and there was the Kingston Trio.
Yeah,
and, but you could also tune into that show and hear people like Josh White, and you could hear Mississippi John Hurt.
Right, right.
You could hear you could hear the homogenized version of folk music, and you could also hear the old, really original stuff.
Yeah.
And you know, so he brought this guitar home, and I realized that it came really easy to me to sit and play Michael Row the Boat Ashore. And, then he brought home the first album by Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
And that's when I was completely floored by the emotional impact of the lyrics and music together and the delivery. And then I got a little more serious, but I was still an acoustic guy.
Yeah, yeah.
And then along came the Beatles.
Right. Yep.
On Ed Sullivan.
And like everybody else, watching girls scream was enough to...
Yeah, but also the energy.
Yeah.
And the thing of seeing a band that was 4 guys that seemed to be that tight and that much of a unit, it was almost like they were the same guy.
Yeah.
And it was like one guy playing 4 instruments, and they were so tuned into each other, and it looked like that was the most fun you could have in your life.
Yeah.
I really wanted to just be in a band.
Yeah, yeah.
And like that.
And you became a member of many bands, I think, on the Jersey Shore, playing the bars and whatnot.
Yeah.
I was just in Norway at the Natodenfest a couple of weeks ago, and I interviewed Southside Johnny.
Okay.
Who was basically, you know, in 67, 68, when I was going to Asbury Park and Seaside Heights, he was playing in bands. And he remembered the Hullabaloo nightclubs. You remember those in Jersey?
Yeah,
you had to be under 18 to get in, and you know. But anyway, once you moved to California, you know, for the people who say, well, gee, Walter Trout, what are his blues roots? You have some very deep blues roots before you became a member of Canned Heat.
I was playing in a club band out there, and a friend of mine said to me, hey, up on the Redondo Beach Pier, there's some kind of older black guys, and they jam on Sundays, and I'm going to drive you up there this week, and we'll see if you can sit in. And I went up and I sat in, and they asked me to join the band, and it turned out to be John Lee Hooker's backup band.
Wow.
With Deacon Jones and Finest Tasby, who's now one of the lead singers of the Manish Boys.
That's right, yeah.
And so I ended up, over the course of the next few years, I played with John Lee Hooker, Big Mama Thornton, Percy Mayfield, Lowell Folsom, Pee Wee Creighton, Eddie Cleanhead Vinson, Joe Tex, the soul singer. I played with Bobby Hatfield, who was one of the singers of the Righteous Brothers.
Wow.
But, you know, I did a few years where I was literally like the only white guy in the band, and I have some photos of those bands, and I'm very easy to pick out. I was 23 years old. I had all this blonde hair. And they accepted me, and they taught me, and I learned so much from those guys, and I still love them dearly, and that's why most every one of my records, I try to get Deacon Jones on there, and on Full Circle, I have Deacon, and I also do a song with Finest.
That's right.
Finest sings lead, and he and I wrote the song together. And I have Deacon Jones on, he's on 2 cuts on Blues for the Modern Days.
Right,
He's on Brothers Keeper and Turn Off Your TV.
Yeah, yeah.
So I still keep in touch with those guys. I love them dearly. And they were really, to me, the University of the Blues.
Yeah,
I spent 3 or 4 years just doing gigs with them. And through playing with John Lee Hooker, is how I got heard by some of the guys in Canned Heat.
Right, which was, you know, if I look at your career and I divide it into thirds, that would have been like the first third of Walter Trout, when the world started to get to know you.
Yeah.
From about 80 to 85 with Canned Heat?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I joined Canned Heat, actually, it was New Year's Eve, leading into 1980.
Yeah.
Was my first gig, New Year's Eve.
Right.
And in 82, we did some shows opening for John Mayall.
Okay.
He had the original Blues Breakers back together with Mick Taylor and John McVie and Colin Allen.
Wow.
And we did 3 shows with them, and Mr. Mayall said to me, hey, I'd like to hear you play second guitar for Mick Taylor. And I went off and did 2 weeks of shows with the original Blues Breakers, and I played with Mick Taylor and John McVie and went and did shows in California.
Yeah.
And then about 6 months later, John Mayall hired Canned Heat to be his backup band.
Okay.
And we went out and we toured for a year as John Mayall and Canned Heat. And we did a USA Network concert.
Yeah.
As that configuration, and we toured the United States and Canada and Australia for a year.
Wow.
And then I stayed with Canned Heat for another year and a half, and I joined John in 84.
Okay.
Permanently. It was me and Coco Montoya.
Yeah.
Kind of dueling lead players.
Yeah.
And I stayed with John till 89.
Till 89,
and went solo.
And I know you have great, just like you talked about John Lee Hooker and the others who you learned from, I know you have great respect and admiration and appreciation for what John Mayall gave to you.
John Mayall was the greatest influence musically for me, and also as a band leader. He's an unbelievable band leader, and that is a talent unto itself. I put him in the league in the blues. He's like a Count Basie or a Duke Ellington.
Right.
Those guys were not just musicians and composers, they were band leaders, and that is a talent unto itself.
Yeah, yeah.
And Mr. Mayall is the ultimate band leader in this kind of music.
Wow.
And he has a technique he uses, and I studied it and watched it, and it's very subtle, but he's great at keeping things light. Not having tension. He's great at keeping the chemistry between the musicians. He's great at getting the best out of his players.
Wow.
And I had just the greatest time working with that guy, and I still think of him as like a father to me, and I have ultimate love and respect for Mr. Mayall.
Oh, yeah, yeah.